Hi, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today is exciting, and let me explain to you why today is exciting for me personally. I love jazz. I love instruments, and a lot of people don't know that outside of being a professional athlete, bodybuilder, football player, so forth, I do have other attributes to who I am. And one is I'm a musician, and the instruments of my choice growing up first started out with the alto saxophone. Even though I was introduced to other instruments, the alto sax just seemed to be that niche for me. Then later moved on to the electric guitar and then the bass. But out of all of those instruments and a little bit of keyboard, my favorite two instruments have always been the alto sax and the bass guitar. But I know you guys are probably saying, well, why the alto sax? It takes a special individual to operate that particular piece of that instrument. And I think what I mean by that is you got to really have something down in here when you start to release that energy into that instrument and then start to articulate who you are and put it out into that through that instrument. Today, I am pleased to have on the show, and believe me, it was hard getting this man on the show because he's everywhere. He's since 1962, the birth of this man, he has been all over the world sharing his message in music. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the show the one, the only, the Hall of Famer in music himself, Mr. Walter Beasley. What's up, Walter?
I'm all right. Just listening to you talk, man. Shoot, I'd rather just listen to you.
So I know you're getting ready to go on tour, but before we get started, Walter, tell the viewers a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your journey before we get into the questions and answers.
Well, I currently live in Yuma, Arizona, and I'm from a town called El Centro, California, which is an hour west of here. Mm-hmm. I moved to Boston very quickly. Moved to Boston, went to Berklee College of Music, graduated, started teaching there. Taught for 35, closer to 40 years. Taught rhythm section, saxophone, voice. Became famous in my genre while I was teaching full time, and became the highest selling full time professor in history, actually, while I was teaching there. I quit there because I just felt that the music was not being taken seriously, and changes in the music industry was not being taken seriously. Mm-hmm. And because I was teaching music business on my own and within the administration at the time of the school at the time, I didn't feel morally, I didn't feel moral when it came time to talk to my students, follow a program that was antiquated. So I just said, look, just do it on your own. Continue touring, continue playing, and you'll be fine. So I did that when I was, I guess, 55 years old. I just walked away. Right. Yeah, and they said, basically, I remember the human resources saying, Walter, why are you walking away? If you stay for 5 more years, you'll be the most successful teacher ever in the institution financially. And I simply told the brother, I said, man, I didn't get into teaching to become a millionaire, to make money. I got into teaching to be effective with students, and it's no longer the case here. So I had to leave. I remember it was pouring down rain, and when he came, he said, this is what you're going to walk away with, and this is what you can have. It was pouring down rain. I was walking back to my car. I said, no, I'm out of here. I didn't get into it for this, and I'm not fighting these battles that they really don't want to win. So I left, and for 2 years, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was still touring and playing. I came to California, and I saw the condition of my parents and where they were staying. My mother always wanted to leave El Centro and go somewhere else, so they went to San Diego. But they began deteriorating quite rapidly, and I knew that I was the only one in a position to come and turn things around for them, make sure that they were safe in their declining years. And so I left everything on the East Coast. I had been there for 40 years, like I said, and I just packed up, sold the house very quickly, and came out here, got them out of the assisted living complex in San Diego, moved them into Yuma, Arizona. The taxes were much better here, so moved them in there. I still wanted to tour. And I did one round, I believe, and then my mother got deathly ill, and I just canceled everything. to take care of her in the final days. And then my father was ill all the time. So I just said, I can't do this. So I just stopped touring for 7 years. 3 years of that was taking care of my parents. And I just figured that I couldn't do it. I couldn't do everything. So I stayed home. I did one album while I was here, while my mother was passing, called Going Home. But then I stopped everything. I stopped the touring because she really needed something. She needed me, and I asked her if she wanted me to stay, and she said yes, so I did. So after she passed, I prayed that my father, that God would give me a year with my father. He gave me a year and a half, and my father got ill. I moved him into my home because I just didn't like what I was seeing. I would have moved both of them into my home had I known that, the same money I was spending to keep them comfortable in assisted living, I could have been spending to keep them comfortable in my own home. But they don't tell you that. They want you, you're this, you're that, you're this, that. But my mother always wanted, I can't really say this, but my mother always wanted to be taken care of by people who didn't look like her too, because that was her way of saying, back at you, you did this to me, now you take care of me. My mother's from the South. She went through, the Jim Crow. She went through the segregation and all that. So she, she wanted payback. So she liked the idea of folks taking care of her, if you know what I mean.
Hey, Walter,
so
let me ask you a question real quick.
Sure.
And thanks for coming on, sharing your heartfelt story too. You mentioned something, and this we're about empowering people and educating people. So I'm going to go back a little bit. I have no idea about the West Coast. I grew up in Georgia. Pretty much 1963. You was 1962. And I seen how my parents reacted and so forth. But what was it like for a young man in the West Coast growing up in the 60s and seeing what their parents had to go through with the segregation? Because a lot of people today, we're talking 2024, they don't understand. It wasn't that far of a gap that we moved. These things still exist, and they wasn't that far away. What was it like for you on the West Coast? What was it like on the West Coast during that time?
Well, as my partners would say, I had a pretty good childhood growing up in a small town in El Centro, California. To your point, though, I could tell that something was not, my parents' political view was much different. My father was raised in Utah and Arkansas. He had some other stuff going on, but he was much more open to being friendly and accommodating to everybody and everything. My mother, however, was raised in Virginia. And my mother had to ride in the back of buses, all that kind of stuff. And she was much more conservative, much more vocal as related to discrimination and racism. So when they moved to California, everybody thinks that California is so liberal and we get along with everybody. Now, Los Angeles and San Diego, it's a different kind of situation. El Centro, California is close to Yuma, Arizona, which is conservative. I call it Donald Trump country because they love him here. So I grew up an hour away from the most, conservative thing, probably state in the country. So my parents, raised us to believe that we were as good as anybody, but not better and not worse. So the first thing I remember learning in school was when they taught us about the history of California, how the United States pretty much stole Mexico from California, or from the United States. I mean, they must stole it from Mexico. So I go home one day and I said, I think we need to move out of California. My parents said, and my mother says, why? I said, because Mexico's going to come back and take this because we stole it from them. Stuff like that. And then I learned, this is how I learned, this is how I learned about my history. I was playing in a band called Los Elegantes, and a Hispanic group, and they were going through the Cesar Chavez movement and stuff like that out here, farm workers and so on and so forth. So he would come and during the time we would play, he would come and teach us about what was going on in La Raza or what was happening in the history of the Mexican Americans. He looked at me one day and said, Walter, how much do you know about your own people? And I may have been 13, 14 years old, and I didn't know much at all. So at that point, I started asking my parents about this and that, and that's when I, started putting two together. I would go to the library and research. And, and in California, like I said, San Diego and Los Angeles, much more liberal. El Centro, much more conservative. And we were going through things like the farm workers strike and so on and so forth. It really encouraged me to go back and think about the struggle. So I started researching Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Rousseau, other philosophers that dealt with racism, differences in people and philosophy and stuff like that. So it wasn't until when we used to go every year to Virginia or every other to Virginia to visit our grandparents. Man, look, we would have to stay in a certain part of the town because my grandmother was afraid something would happen to her babies if we went to an area that was white. Right. We went to an area where there were white people who were dating black people, because that was all defined in the small town of Virginia. And I thought, what the hell is this? Right. So, in fact, some of the members of my family hated going to Virginia to visit my grandparents because it was so tight like that. And you could feel the hatred, you could feel the tension. You know that. Oh yeah, man. In the like you say, in the 60s, right. Especially, man. You know, I still remember places that we couldn't go in Christiansburg, Virginia, because it was hot. My grandparents thought it was hot, and the potential of being hotter. So we couldn't go there, and we knew who all the interracial couples were, you know, and we weren't supposed to, you know, be too friendly with them. This is in the 60s because of the fear that something may go down, and my grandmother didn't want us around all that. So, you know, growing up in that, it was different. Then when I moved to Boston, to your point, it was just like, I'm thinking that, you know, head of, you know, this is going to be wonderful because not going to be any racism, or at least not as much, whatever. The first day I get to Boston, me and Branford become very, very close friends. Branford Marcellus. I don't know if you're familiar with him. So Branford Marcellus goes to a parade down in East Boston, but it was an Irish parade. We didn't know nothing about this stuff. So he takes his buddy. So all of a sudden, they start calling Branford all this kind of names and stuff like that. And they pull out a bottle, and Branford takes off running and leaves his white friend at the parade because Branford's a track star in high school. So he ran all the way back. I say, B, where's your friend? He said, well, I had to leave him. I don't know what the hell's going on in Boston, but this is crazy down here. So they had cracked the boy's head open, like 15 stitches. He had to go to the hospital. And at that point, I knew that they had lied to me about Boston. And then I started thinking, yeah, they had these bus riots here the year before I came, where they were trying to bust the students into the white neighborhoods. Right. And they were, you know, there was a lot of violence and stuff like that too. So then I just started saying, look, it's like this all over the country. Yeah. You know, that's what I mean. I had been to the South, some weird stuff. And then in California, as I started researching the history of the United States, finding out that, you know, that the settlers had come and stolen everything out west, and, you know, and slaves had been offered freedom in Mexico and so on. So it was a whole bunch of stuff going on in my head. So I don't know if you asked all about that, but that's how it was for me growing up. And I learned a lot from people of different races, black, brown, and white. I'm sorry, brother. But
when you start seeing all this, because it sounds like, man, you traveled down the same bus, but different locations. Because I remember the same thing happening in the South, and I remember the same thing happening when I went to the Midwest. The segregation was taking place, but it was like in the 80s, and I was like, wow. But when you're young and growing up, you really don't understand it all, because all your history hasn't been taught to you. It's been selected, picked. But when you seen all this stuff going on, how did music happen to come into that, into your fold?
It was my refuge. It was my refuge. I could go if whatever was going on outside of my room. I could always retreat to my room and put on the music and let it heal me. And that's what I did my whole life. And that which healed me, I learned to express, because I wanted to heal other people with my music. Even as a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid, I wanted people to feel the way I felt when I heard Grover Washington Jr., when I heard John Clemmer, when I heard Donny Hathaway. I wanted people to feel that way about my expression, the way I felt when I listened to them.
What led you to the jazz part, Walter? What led you to the jazz part? Because you mentioned artists like Donny Hathaway, Roberta Flack, Marvin Gaye. These are more individuals that were growing up during the Motown area. But this is where I'm about to go with this. Right. And you can shed some light into that. Right. You heard about the Berry Gordy's, the Temptations, and the Motown, but there wasn't a lot of emphasis put on the jazz artists. So how did you wind up understanding more about the jazz, and what converted you over from the Motown sound to being a jazz artist? Because let's get real. In the 60s, 70s, it was more R&B than it was ever jazz. Right.
If one thing, I used to teach the Motown class in Boston when it first came, when I started teaching that. And what I found out in my research, or not even research, but even when I was a kid, remember the Temptations had a record called Live at the Copacabana, right? Yeah. Which they sang jazz. They sang a whole bunch of jazz. And Marvin Gaye always wanted to be a jazz singer. He got an album out, or had an album out. I think it's called Midnight Lover, something to that effect, where he sang Marvin Gaye to him, just like Marvin Gaye. So I'm in that section where I'm listening to Marvin Gaye, My father's listening to Nat King Cole.
Right.
I'm putting them both together. If you listen to what else? Grover Washington Jr. Grover Washington Jr. I think he was on, but he was playing "Mercy, Mercy, Mercy." That was one of the first songs I ever heard him play.
Okay.
And he played "You Are the Sunshine of My Life," which was like you say, R&B. So
right.
There was a fusion of jazz and R&B even in the '60s. When I was growing up, that was my formative years. Like you say, the R&B was much more successful and much more whatever, but still that moved me more than anything else was the fusion of the two elements, right? So that's how I came up. And not only that, but the third element was Latin music, because I was down here and I played in a band called, like I said, called Los Elegantes. So when I'm playing, we're playing this music, we're also playing cumbias and what they call cumbias, rancheras, and all that. And I learned how to speak Spanish. So that is the foundation of how I came up and how I got interested. Plus, I had a mentor named Mr. Jimmy Cannon, who encouraged us to learn all types of music, but be proficient in all types of music and study the history of the people who made the music. And that's how all this stuff came together. So by the time I was 18, he used to say that we had you ready for the world by the time you're 18 before you even went to college. And he was correct, because I was inside me was all of that.
Explain to me the age of 13, which I think is really crazy. At the age of 13, you are already performing and singing Spanish.
Right.
I mean, that's in started a band. I mean, that's kind of unheard of.
Well, I was in, there was a band, like I said, called Los Elegantes. They were the main band down here. They were playing King Singing. They were making money. And we knew they were making money when we were like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. So one of my goals was to get in that band for them to acknowledge that I was ready. So let me explain it this way. The first half of my childhood, I stayed in a Black neighborhood with a few Latin or Hispanics and Chicanos in that area. Then I moved to the Chicano neighborhood, or the Mexican American neighborhood, where it was all Hispanic first generation. So the majority of people who were there spoke Spanish, only Spanish. Right. So either I was going to survive, thrive, or whatever. But if I was going to do any of those things, I need to learn the language. So I started to learn it, but I didn't really learn it until I joined that group. When they saw me, they saw that I could play, they saw I could sing a little bit, whatever. They let me into the group. So at 13, 13 or 14, I was already working in clubs that I shouldn't be in. Really? So they were like, on the breaks, we couldn't go out and mingle too much because we were underage and we weren't supposed to be there. So they put us in a separate room and stuff like that. So, we'd be cool, but I worked as an adult. And then at age of 13, 14, I also started working in the fields. My father was a migrant worker who also had an education, formal education. Right. And his philosophy was, I'm gonna teach you how to be a man and work as hard as you can doing what I do. And then after you come out of the fields, you'll know that you can do anything and are capable of doing everything and anything to take care of yourself and your family. And that's at 13, 14, that's when everything, kind of changed for me.
You just said something. I'm glad we had the chance to really talk, man. I really appreciate this, because you're bringing up a lot of things that now Hollywood and the media just makes it seem like we can't get along. When you see the West Coast and you see the Latin Kings and the Mexicans and all this, and you're telling me a whole different story. You're telling me that, y'all lived on different sides of town, but you guys worked the fields together, you communicated together, you've all had a sense of family together. What do you think has happened between now to then that Hollywood has made it seem like that there's always been a struggle with the different races, especially on the West Coast?
I think it's beneficial for Hollywood to say there's always been that kind of struggle with the West Coast and the East Coast. I think it makes money for them. It definitely did. When I was growing up, I remember thinking to myself, and even now we can talk about what's going on now, but I remember thinking about, now I'm darker, right? And I'm thinking about, the first time I got called the N-word was from a Hispanic brother down the street who was darker than me. So I was like, this don't make no sense. But it was the way, the way they were pitted against each other. We were pitting against each other. I learned when I was 15, I was dating a brown-skinned sister from Mexicali. I'm not dating, but, I had a crush on her. She had green eyes. I'll never forget that. I used to sneak across the border to see her and her family, right, in my mother's car. I was crazy. But one day she told me, she said, Walter, she said, people don't understand that they drop more slaves in Mexico and Peru than they drop in anywhere else in South America or the continent. People don't even realize that, or Brazil, and that's how we all got these different shades and stuff like that, and they don't recognize that. She
Right.
also told me that the third president of Mexico was a black man. I was like, what? She
What?
said, yes, he was half black and he was half Mexican. His name was Vicente Guerrero. And I'm like, get out of here. Now I ran back to my little town and said, look, y'all don't understand. And they looked at me like I was an idiot, because the whole, like you say, the whole thing was being shaped that no, you have to stay with this group, you have to stay with that group. They weren't telling us that when we worked together, what was possible. In fact, Vicente Guerrero, who was half black and half Latin, kicked Spain out of Mexico and forced the end of slavery decades before the United States.
Man.
We don't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
No, I mean, and we still don't, unless you're from here and you do some event. It had me hit me by accident because I was trying to get, I was trying to date. Let's put it that way. So she ended up educating me at 15, 16, whatever. And I held that close, but I didn't tell it to too many people because it was against the norm.
Right.
I mean, people would rather believe in their little, what they believe. So, and people, and even in Texas, when I go to Texas and I see the way they talk about illegal this and legal that, I'm like, I tell people, I say, people in Mexico ain't illegal. They just coming home. That's all it is. It used to be there. So that's it. When you get, and you still have some conflict between black and brown, and that breaks my heart because of the way I came up, first of all, and knowing the truth behind the matter, where there's always profit in dissension. And some people realize that, and some people get confused, like, oh, no. They start talking about the illegals, this, illegal, that. First of all, what, 2/3 of this country you didn't even belong to us, or did it belong? You know what I mean? I mean, we got to really think about this, man. So, musically speaking, what I try to do, if you follow my recordings, I try to do like a Latin tune on every one of my recordings. Like this time, I mean, last record I did a tune called Aquí. And it's basically a dedication to the way I came up. I came up with R&B, jazz, Latin.
Yeah.
So I always want to do something that reflects the way I came up. And this album coming out that I'm having probably about 6 months. I'm doing a single called Abud, and it's about the struggle of the Cuban crisis when they were at war with Spain and all that kind of stuff. But it's a really nice song. But I try to do that. I don't try to hit people over the head with it. But this is my story. This is the way I came up, and I probably do a book about it as well. Maybe that would be because a lot of people are growing up this way as well.
You've had over 30 some albums throughout your career.
Yeah.
Is there any one or two that really stands out for you? That's a lot of albums, and each one of the albums, like you said, I know because I've been following your career, has a message in it. But out of those over 30 ones, which ones really mean the most to you and why?
The ones that I own.
We'll talk about the record labels later.
The ones that I own. I am gonna be very serious because I've been at 62. Like I said, my family got in trouble. My mother and father, we start putting finances together. When your parents get older, it's going to be a commitment. Let's just put it that way.
Right.
So I was able to realize, and not even just then, but earlier on, that I had material, I had catalog that was valuable, that could be that I could take loans against, or that I could sell in order to make not only ends meet, but to make a pretty decent life for myself 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me was worth every single practice session, every single heartbreak, every single woman who told me you ain't gonna be it and left. And when I was younger and stuff like that, it made it all good.
Right.
So, and I say that, musically, I understand the question to be the musical question. That's a great question. But in the totality of everything, the ones that I own, I'm so grateful for the decision to make the decision to break away from the record establishment before a lot of my colleagues did, because now when I get calls and I talk about the situation as an owner rather than somebody who has to, who has no power in negotiations or no power in the conversation. And that's what I'm most grateful for with my career, that I made the decision to go on my own, to own my expression, and to deal with it that way. I just, before we got on here, I saw something by Kanye, somebody who was talking about Kanye, and they said, he made billions and billions of dollars, and now they're getting ready to release his shoes without his name on it.
Right.
So, so what's the use of making all of that money? I shouldn't say what's the use, but he made all that money, but he doesn't own the product.
Mm-hmm.
Now he makes a stand. and they take it away from them.
What do you
You know?
think? What do you think what do you think the like of? Because you look back, and I know as we get older, we tell our kids this, man, if I can go back and know what I know now. But I noticed through your bio, you signed with Mercury Records, and I think the other one was Warner Brother Records, right? What was the difference?
That was the publishing for my books. That was publishing my book, but yeah.
When you're talking about publishing, people having your music at that time, how much control did they have over you, and how much?
Everything.
Really?
Everything. Bruh, I mean, I'm in conversations now with a record company to get my masters back, but and it's a huge conglomerate. They sold the rights to my records 3, 4, 5, 6 times without me even knowing it, because it's not my record. I just played on the record. They gave me a couple of coins and said, look, it's ours. They sold my product. This is the Walter Beasley records, and the first 2 or first 3.
Right.
So now I'm going back to them because Congress said I can go back and own my own stuff. That mega record company spends money to keep artists like me spending money to try to get my product back. So I've decided not to try to get it back, but I'm going to hopefully make as much money as I can to walk away. You know, that's just for those 3 albums. The rest of the albums, pretty much except for 2, I own. So had I known what I know now, but remember the record industry, I only had one option, and that was to sign with a major record company and get pretty much screwed, you know, and that's all we knew until the record. And I was so blessed and so glad to see when the record industry broke apart, because it allowed people like me who understood the value of ownership to own expression. And at the end of the day, if I could, and I'm telling people now, you know, don't get caught up in this BS, because they're just taking it from you. Like even the smooth jazz artists now, they want to sign with these major record companies and stuff like that. And they're killing them, man. It's a 360 deal where they own their masters, they own their touring, they own their merchandise. And just because you want to get the applause, you'll sell everything, including your, you know, whatever, to get in the public. And I don't know if I can curse on here or not.
Yeah,
but
you can.
Oh, cool, man. You should have told me that up front, dog. You know, but that's
hold on
what
one
I'm saying
second,
now.
Walter, hold on one second. We got to cut that phone off. Hold on one second.
Sure.
Cut that phone off, because it was ringing.
Let me get my water.
Okay, we're sorry about that.
All right.
They don't know how to cut the phone off. Okay, so I'm gonna ask another question. Oh yeah, you can cuss on here. We always put on there explicit. So my next question is out of all of the jazz artists that you've worked with, who were some of the most memorable ones and why? And going forward, who would be some of the ones that you want to currently work with? And I know one of them, I already know who it's going to be. Marion Meadows.
We already worked together.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, we'll stay there for one. Marion Meadows, I believe, says the most with the fewest notes of anybody, except for I'm a student of Miles Davis as well. Right. I've been on the stage where Marion Meadows has brought down the band to a quiet whisper and brought them up to a quiet fire.
Really?
In one solo. I had never seen that before until I played with him. And with the soprano, you don't have much range. Like you said before, the alto is a much more range oriented. I mean, you get bottom, middle, top. Right. With the saxophone, you got to live on the top. So you got a lower top. And Marion Meadows, within 4 or 5 notes, 6 notes, the way he places the notes at the right time, where he puts the notes, how he phrases, you know, what he chooses to play, is able to really take control of a rhythm section and an audience. With very little effort. And I think that's amazing. That's number one. That's, you know, I mean, you brought his name up. I would have to say that the most interesting time of my life happened, when I was in Central California playing with Elegante Saúl and other bands around here, formulating my style to get my style together. Right. Also, when I went to college, I met Greg Osby. Actually, we competed against each other a lot. Greg Osby, I became friends with, and we're friends now. I'm closest with Greg Osby than I am with anybody else that we went to school with. But Greg Osby was part of that. Donald Harrison, who's a great jazz, and Branford Marcellus, we all came at the same time.
Really?
Rochelle Farrell was there at the same time. Rochelle Farrell was there. Seeing anybody else you might think about. The guy who was on Kevin, oh man, I forgot Kevin Eubanks, who was on the Tonight Show. That was the same year. So no, that was where I learned the most, from those brothers, because, and even not the curriculum, and I learned some things from Berkeley, but I was exposed to the music long before I came to Berkeley. I was exposed to Duke Ellington, Jimmy Lunsford, Count Basie, Cannonball Adderley, Grover Washington Jr. All these people, my instructor made me learn. We practiced it. We practiced old school jazz, really, in improvisation. But by the time I came to Boston, those brothers and others, Tim Williams, hit me to things that I knew nothing about, and I went and learned them on my own and practiced them on my own. And that's how I learned. I played with George Duke, which was great. We played No Rhyme, No Reason. He would have been one that I would have said yes. And I've already played. I played thanks to Byron Miller. Played a song with Stevie Wonder called Heart. Oh man, I always forget the name of it. It's myself, Byron Miller, and Stevie Wonder. Beautiful, beautiful song. Heartfelt, that one I can never remember. And that's pretty much my thing. I've never really wanted to play with my heroes. It just kind of happens that way.
Right.
So my heroes are the people who support my music, my band, my band, people who are in my band, people, who are not even who are getting ready to play. Those are the people who are my heroes and the people that I like to play with. If you notice on my social media, I don't have a lot of pictures with stars and
I noticed that.
Stuff like that. Yeah. I would rather take the pictures with my fans who support my music, with my band members and road manager. Those are the people who hold me up.
Now, what's your style? You mentioned
style. I'm a beast, brother.
I already know. Hey, look, you see that right there. We both are beasts.
You know what I like? I remember times when I played, and I'm going to mention names, where I'd be on stage with other saxophone players who were very, 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 very good. Very good. And they would come out, just hitting them fire. Right. Yeah. They'd be on like 9, right? So I sit back and let them do their thing. You peak very quickly when you're on 9 when you start playing, if you know what I mean. So I'll let it do it. I'll get up there and I'll start my shit on 2, right? 2 or 3, let the band come on down, and I come on up and do my thing like this. Snap it off, man. That kind of shit. That's what I do. And if you start low and think that I don't have fire, I'll start up there around 7 or 8 myself, just to let you know that I can bring it that way too. Not because of my ego, but because I know how I've learned to play saxophone. I've learned both sides of it. I've learned how to tell a story when there's no story to be told, to create my own story, and I've learned how to tell other people's stories quite well. So I'm good, man. I'm gonna
ask you something. I love Kenny G, and he came to Indianapolis. This was so cool. He was at Indianapolis like 2 years ago. I had front row seats to see him. Mary Meadows came here in November. He was supposed to come on the show, but I guess our wires got crossed. But what I'm seeing here with those particular artists, right? Mary Meadows, like you said, has those little particular things that let you know that's his music. Kenny G has a particular something that that's a Kenny G song. What is it that you have to let people know that's a Walter Beasley song? Like a hook or something that's a signature, because we all leave our signature in our work.
Well, mine is my sound. One of the best compliments that I can think of when people come and say, Walter, I just heard you on XM and I knew it was you, the first note in, second note in. So let me know if you can hear that. That's my house cleaner. I just want to make sure to tell her to do something else if you can hear the knocking, okay?
Okay.
The biggest compliment you can get is for someone to say, I knew it was you 2 notes in, 3 notes in.
Okay.
And that's what I've developed over the years. When you think about a double threat with me singing and playing, other than George Benson, I don't think there's been any instrumentalist/singer who's done what I've done in the industry on the jazz, on the smooth jazz or instrumental tip, except Ronnie Laws. What you would probably argue the point.
Oh my God, I love Ronnie Laws. What's your take on Ronnie Laws?
That's my homie, man. That's my mentor.
I love Ronnie Laws. Friends and Strangers.
He is. That's how I came up. See, here's the thing. when you listen to him play the solo on Friends and Strangers,
Yeah.
it's the best solo R&B solo ever because it's minimal. He only plays what and only says what needs to be played and what needs to be said. That's how I came up.
Ain't
with
that
him
funny
and
that we both recognize that one particular song? Now that Friends and Strangers album,
Yep.
every
Yep.
single song on there was like, oh my God.
Yep. That's why, oh wow, this is possible because he sings so well. He sang first, and I was like, oh man, I can do this, you know. Or even when you go back to Louis Armstrong, people always try to intellectualize the way he played. The brother played the way he sang.
Right.
That's it. He played like he was picking cotton in the cornfields and sang that way too. So my thing is, at this point, I think that would be my, you know, if I put down the horn and start singing, Lovely Day, or start singing Be Thankful for What You Got, people are like, whoa, this is different. This is different. And a lot of my colleagues are starting to try to sing too. It's kind of funny to watch them, you know. It's kind of funny actually to kind of watch. Because I mean, hey man, people trying to get that money. But what I can say is I'm grateful and humbled by that. I started our little wave of doing it in the 80s because wasn't nobody doing, you know, that kind of thing when I was coming up.
What's your take on?
Kenny doesn't sing.
What's your take on?
Kenny doesn't sing, and what's the other one? Boney James doesn't sing.
I was just getting ready to say that. What do you think about Boney James and Najee?
I don't like him. No, nobody really likes him. He's not, you know, he's not a good saxophone player. I tell you, the marketing aspect on Boney is great. When he first came out, they didn't show pictures of him on the record cover, but they used all black musicians to create a sound, right? And I thought that was pretty screwed up, to be honest with you. In fact, I'll say it's pretty fucked up, to be honest with you, because all those out here, you know, we're sitting out doing our thing, you know, we're grinding, we're doing this. All of a sudden up comes this dude, you don't know who he is or what he is, but you know it's a record company trick because they've been doing that for, you know, with black music in the 50s and 60s and whatever. So by the time these 3 records in, you know, everybody's like, oh, Boney James got to be a brother. And all of a sudden there's a picture of him.
You know what? I said the same identical thing because you never knew who he was because my baby brother, Darnell, he loves Boney James. And he was liking Boney James when he was in high school. So he the one who helped me to Boney James. But I could never find any pictures of who he was, you know what I mean, until much, much, much later. Now, my second two that I want to talk to you about is your take on, I love this guy, Ramsey Lewis, and Najee.
Came up on Ramsey Lewis. Studied Ramsey Lewis. Studied his music. Najee is one of my closest friends in the industry. Najee, this is the first time I'm gonna say this on your show, but Najee is a better saxophone player than me. What? And as you probably deduced by now, I'm not the most humble person in the world.
Does Najee? Did you ever tell Najee that?
Yeah.
What'd he say?
No, I haven't told him that yet. He'll hear about it now, though.
Oh, okay.
But Najee, I do what I do extremely well. I come out of a tradition. Najee comes out of the same tradition. I think Najee has done more to create a lane for himself than I did, you know, just musically speaking. Okay. And that's why I was grateful to have him on my single called Nice and Easy, Walter Beasley version.
Yeah.
Because now, think about it this way, Najee was the one, too, who broke down the door. See, people don't remember this. Najee was before Kenny G.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
All that bullshit on HBO, that's not true. Najee was before Kenny G, right? When the record company saw the units that Najee was moving, he said, I need me a white dude. And that's how you got Kenny G, because they poured the rock and roll money into Kenny G when they saw what Najee was doing.
Right.
That's the truth. And they won't tell you that because it doesn't sound too romantic, right? Because, oh, my way through Kenny G, and I decided that, man, get the hell out of it. Clyde Davis, that's his name, or something like that.
Right.
Clyde, he said that about Kenny. No, that's not, no. You saw Najee moving gold units, 500,000, 600,000, and you knew that if you got to an Elvis Presley on the saxophone, that you could triple the numbers, and that's what you did. It's that simple. Why do you think people always root against Muhammad Ali when he fought?
Yeah. What do you think about David Sanborn?
Love him. David Sanborn got more heat for putting Hank Crawford on his show so many times when he had that live show. Yeah. You know, that they asked him to get off the show. I think from what the rumor was, he had so many black people on there, they asked him to stop. And he said no. And he left the show. That's my kind of musician. To whom much is given, much is required. You know what kind of country we're living in, so you know your responsibility. You know what's going to happen. That's why I don't mess with Boney James, because you know how you got over. I don't really mess with Kenny G because you know how you got over. And I play the saxophone 3 times as better as both of them, so
Right.
I know. And everybody who knows my style knows that I play that. And I was hoping for him in Virginia, because I'm going to do a gig in Virginia, and he was going to close. I asked to open, and he's not on the hit anymore. I don't know. Maybe he heard that I was on there. He just said, "Nah, I don't want to do that."
What's your message? What's your message now, moving forward? I mean,
Ownership,
ownership,
especially for Black and brown musicians. This is why I talk this way, because I own my music, man. Think about this. If I was signed to Trippin' and Rhythm, signed to a record company, and I was talking this kind of stuff, and there were other people on the label who, maybe were a different hue, who didn't like, what I was saying, but they were selling more records than I because they're a different hue, I'd have a problem, because they wouldn't be putting my records at the front; they'd be putting somebody else at the front.
Right.
I'm my own record company, so I can say what I want to say, and I can speak the truth historically and be okay, because there are people who really love my expression, period. And I'm not being disingenuous, I'm not being angry, and I'm not like that, but I'm simply saying, if you listen to the Little Richard story, if you look at that story, that same story is applicable to smooth jazz.
Right.
Like I said before, Najee should have been the one celebrated on HBO, not Kenny G. They got the wrong G. That's what I always say. They got the wrong G. But all people have to do is listen to the rock and roll thing with Little Richard, when the things they did, and all that kind of stuff. It's the same thing in smooth jazz, same thing with R&B. It's not the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it should be the R&B Hall of Fame. Go ahead, brother, I'm sorry.
How hard is it? You mentioned something when you mentioned about the Kanye West and the young artists, and we have a lot of young artists on here who really are trying to get that push. And I like the way that you told them they need to understand ownership. But what kind of advice would you give young entrepreneurs that are trying to get into the music game? How difficult is it for them to control their music and to still be able to put their name out there? Because like you said, before there was a Kenny G, I already knew there was a Najee. I knew there was a Boney James. I knew there was a Walter Beasley, but you got a whole different generation. You used to be a teacher. You got pissed off because they wasn't hearing the message. What message would you give them now?
Ownership. Know what you own what you know. That's number one. Number two, you have to be the best that you can be. If you don't move yourself when you play saxophone and when you sing, if you don't move yourself, meaning you don't, damn, that sounded good. You got a problem. Dizzy Gillespie said the same thing. That means you're not at the top of your game. That means it's your responsibility to get better. Now, what encourages me is that you can own everything. You're your own publicist, you're your own mixer, you're your own this, you're your own that. You can do everything the record company used to do for us and charge us up the yin yang to do. Period. There is no excuse for you to. Now, if you want to be a star, that's something different than wanting to be a great musician and sell records, right? Because you can be a great musician. Now, that's going to take time. Every aspect of that will take time. Mm-hmm. If you want to be a star, you can just drop your drawers and do something on OnlyFans. Of course, I don't know what OnlyFans is. I'm only speculating. And be a star. I mean, but that you're going to fire out. You're going to fizzle out pretty quickly, and then you got nothing because you built your whole foundation on an image. And when that image crashes down, you have nothing of substance to support it. You know what I mean? So my advice to young people is, this is the greatest time for you to be a musician, because you can own everything. It may take you a little while, but if you develop 1,000 fans, 3,000 fans, 5,000 fans, and 10% of them months buy everything you do.
Right.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
It's very simple. And as you grow older, I tell people all the time, during COVID, and I'm not saying how much I'm making, it's not that much, but I made more money during COVID than I did than the majority of my musicians, because I had a serious catalog that I could either sell or loan against to carry me through, for the next 3 or 4 years. And I was taking care of my parents.
Wow.
So that only came with content. And I try to tell these cats now, but they're not listening. Young folks don't listen. They like, oh, I'm getting ready to tour. I'm getting ready to go on stage. Yeah, okay. And what happens? You break an ankle. What you gonna do? You cried your ass off when COVID hit because you couldn't get on stage. You didn't record. I said record albums before this, because it's gonna happen again. It may not be COVID, but be something else.
Right.
And people will try to take that away. The only way that I was able to create income for myself was to have content that I own.
Right.
Period. Now I know everybody, but Walter, when are you going to tour here? When are you going to tour? We're going to talk about Indianapolis in a minute. When are you going to tour here? When are you going to tour there? Blah, 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 blah. I'm saying, and I'm trying to tell people, I said, look, I'm recording and I'm making content because at the end of the day, when one of these big corporations come and say, Walter, we've been watching and we've been looking at your digital sales numbers and stuff like that. We want your product, or we want a loan again. We want to borrow for a while to make money for us.
Right.
They don't do that when you're on stage.
Right.
They don't come to you on stage and say, you know what, I really like your stage presentation. I really like the response you got from the audience. But you got no content. I can't be two places at one time. I love touring. That's why I don't do it as often as some of my peers. So when I do it, it's good. But when I'm not doing it, I'm in the studio or creating content for the rest of my life and on down the road.
You mentioned some great artists from Bonnie James, and you're doing a feature with Najee and stuff. Do you guys collaborate now since COVID? I mean, you realize now COVID has changed everybody. The music industry has changed. People understanding that they need to own their own content. They need to not reinvent the wheel, but do you guys collaborate with each other now more?
No, people are starting to go back in the same kind of thing they were doing before because the big conglomerates get it. Like TV, perfect example. There's 2 or 3 agencies in smooth jazz that control the predominantly all artists. So how does that work? You got 10, 12, 14, 20, 25 artists. You're petitioning the same. You're trying to get every one of them on the same show? No, you're not. You have your favorites. So you're going to stick Boney up there. You're going to stick blah 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 up there, and the rest of them have to wait their turn to get slotted into a certain festival and stuff like that. Blah blah blah. And I tell people, I said, man, why are you doing this? Why are you putting yourself like that? You got to compete with 3 or 4 different saxophone players in one agency just to feed your family. That's stupid.
Right.
Stop doing that. But you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Secondly, COVID taught us, or should have taught us, that it's content that matters, not the performance. If you're gonna make, I'm just giving a number. If you're gonna make, let's just say, $500,000 in the next 10 years, right, performing, right, and then just if you're younger, do you really think that's going to, unless you get older and something happens, do you really think that's going to support you for the next 10 years?
Right.
No. History teaches us that. I got people, we can see people out there that should be not touring, but I'm glad they are to simply say goodbye. Frankie Beverly, I love him. I love his music. I love everything about him. I love now that they're giving him the slides, beautiful. But Frankie is not Frankie, as far as, that thing. I know he loves the music and everything, but I hope he has the options. But I know he doesn't own that music, right?
Right.
Who's the other one I see all the time? I don't remember. Isley Brothers.
Yeah.
He's 85 years old, man. He's got to be out there. I mean, he had a whole bunch of stuff going on with the IRS and stuff like that. But that breaks my heart because I want to see these OGs, live out beautiful life. B.B. King, I saw him. He was touring when he was, he had troubles with the IRS and that kind of stuff. Man, there's no need for us to do that now. There's no need for us to have to play in front of people all our lives and just have people coming away from the concerts being like, oh my goodness, I don't know about this and that. Talking like that rather than say, oh my God, what a show.
If I'm not mistaken, Frankie Beverly just said he's not going to go back on tour because of the health issues that he's dealing with. But you ask yourself, I know we're coming up on the hour, and I appreciate it. This has been another exciting episode. You guys make sure you keep watching. One thing that you said that makes great sense, it's sad to see these artists, the Isley Brothers, the Ron Isley, the Frankie Beverlys, the B.B. King, still having to perform because the information to own their own stuff really didn't belong to them. Somebody else is making money off of their stuff.
Exactly. Now let's flip it. Okay. Dylan just did, what did he do? A $300 million deal or something like $300 million deal for all the rights to his songs.
Right.
$300 million. Now, I'll never be able to do something like that, but it's the process that intrigues me. If you don't have anything to give or to sell, you got to come out there and shake your ass.
Wow.
And then when you become 60, 70 years old, that ass ain't too,
It
too
ain't too
pretty to look
appealing.
at. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then you got the young bucks coming up who are doing it the way it should be, because you were once a young buck jumping up doing it. So no, man. I mean, it's very simple. And here's the thing about it. Everybody gets it. I used to pray, this is a good thing to come up on. I used to pray for the ability to be the best saxophone player, one of the best saxophone players ever in life. Once I started to get a little bit of money and a little bit of ass, excuse my language, ladies, I apologize. I changed my prayer. I said, look, don't let me get addicted to this, Lord, please. I say, because it's good. Don't let me get addicted to this. Don't. And that's when I started praying. That's when I started making better decisions about my content, better decisions. I don't have an attorney. I do have an attorney, but I don't keep them on retainer. I pay them as we go, rather than all that kind of stuff. I have consultants who because it's not just me, I have a team. I pay, some consultants when I need to be consulted about.
And you got a great manager too, because she was spot on spot with communication.
That's my assistant. My assistant is, she keeps me going.
Yeah.
One of my assistants, actually, she lives in Venezuela, so I mean, she's all in, and I have a couple other assistants. I have 2 road band people. Why do you have 2? No, I have a videographer and I have a road manager. And they take care of all the aspects of what needs to happen when I'm on the road to maximize what that concert is for me and what it should be for other people. So I was in summing up some of the stuff that we talked about today. Again, it's own what you know what you own. At the end of the day, if I lose money, I don't blame somebody else. I blame me, because I should have been more prepared or done more due diligence in doing, like Bitcoin, for instance. I think Bitcoin, even though I don't have that much of it, represents the freedom of Black people or brown people. It really does. I mean, I'll tell you the story. I mean, I'm cool unless you got to go, but
no, you're fine.
When my mother was dying of cancer, I walked into a bank in Arizona, right? And they said, yeah, you're good for this, you're good for that, but I needed 15 grand to do the PET scan. Money talks, and if you got to go through the whole Medicare stuff like that, it could have been weeks before we got her to do a PET scan. I was like, no, we're gonna do this now. I went to a bank. Oh, yeah, you qualify for this. And then they called me back 3 days later. Well, royalties are not something that we like to bank on, and blah, because the okie doke spots, because they saw what I was and they saw that, I had musician salary or whatever. I went in, I started thinking about it, and I remember that I had, Bitcoin, and you could take a loan against the Bitcoin. And I think I paid $150 a month until I just paid the thing all back. But I got the 15 grand in 3 days. They didn't ask my salary. They didn't ask who I was. They didn't ask what I was. I had the Bitcoin, and that was the property that I loaned. It's like a house that I loaned against. So now I don't need a bank. I didn't need a bank to do anything. Still don't. So that's, that's a whole different subject. But my point is, that's even more of a reason to be your own boss. Now, if you put $5 into Bitcoin last year, your $5 would be worth $10 in savings. If you put $500 in there, now it'd be $1,000 in savings 1 year, right? So I'm using it as a hedge against inflation, because I'm getting older, and I'm using it as a master savings plan, because it goes up and down, but if you look out over 2, 3, 4 years, it's gone up, 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 up. I need what I have to last me through my 70s and 80s, God willing, if that's what's going to be the case. And banks aren't going to do that. They're just not going to do that. So every move I make, I want to make it as not as a boss, but as a person who's an owner of everything or every decision he makes. And that's what would be my lesson to musicians, even in music, because we didn't talk so much about music. But if I play a note and that damn note ain't supposed to be what I wanted to be, guess whose fault it is? It's mine.
Right.
Who am I blame? If that phrase don't come out the way it's supposed to, it's only because I didn't practice it. That's ownership. And it starts right there with musicians. Period. If you only got 2 people on your Facebook page, whose fault is that?
Yours.
It's yours.
Yeah. You're getting ready to go on tour. Before we wrap up, you're getting ready to go on tour. What are some of the places that you're going to go to?
Some adult bars.
Remember, you said that, not me.
Okay? I gotta do serious. Okay. Well, not that I wasn't, but Charlotte. I gotta do Charlotte. I gotta do Charlotte, DC, Boston. Where else? Charlotte, DC, Boston, Baltimore, St. Louis. Cleveland. I'm missing some. I'm missing a couple. I usually do about 10 to 15 a year now because I like I said, because when I go out, I'm going to be on the road. I'm also going to be doing studio sessions because I'm going to do a tribute to John Clemmer.
Right.
And that'll take a week. And another week, I'll do something else. I'm going to do the Latin piece in Boston. So my touring is not only just touring, but it's also recording in different places as well.
How do you pick your places that you go to, Walter?
They pick me.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, even see, I don't have an agent. They call my number, or they call the number, or they email us on the website, and then we talk numbers. And that's another thing too. I'll tell you this story if you got time. And
you got time. Go ahead. Go ahead.
This is the story that defines, I think, what I'm talking about. When Boney James was at his I shouldn't have said his name. When an artist was on, it was a jazz artist at the top. He refused to let other people who played saxophone onto that date that he was playing on. So there were many saxophone players who actually couldn't really get off because, and even if they had hit on smooth jazz radio, because that they wouldn't allow the promoters wanted that crossover money, let's just say.
Right.
So once and for that money, they were willing to just discount black saxophonists, right? Well, if this is what it takes to bring him in, then y'all can't play. Now, agent told me this. This isn't me. An agent told me this. And that's when I decided, no, F this. My father, like I said before, taught me to outthink and outwork this. So I think it was Cleveland. It was Cleveland. When one of these things happened, I said to myself, no, this is what I'm good. I know from my days with Lloyd Legante, Savor, and just other jazz bands along the way, or other bands along the way, how to do this. So I got with a very local, small club. And I called and I said, look, I know what your club is like. I know how many sales you got. I'll do this for damn near nothing. Just give me the CD money for the first night. When you make money, then we're going to talk. Went in there, sold them out. They ain't made tons of money. So then I talked to them again because this is what's going to cost for night 2, night 3, night 4. By the time I finished, I was the only act in that club's history, or maybe even the city, that played 5 nights straight, selling them out 2 shows a night.
That's crazy.
I made more money doing that than I would have done. And plus, I met people. We got what do you call it? Email addresses. I sold products, into the thousands a night. So I mean, that's how you go around the problem, or a challenge. Because my goal is not to be concerned about anybody else's money but my own. Right. So when I go to Cleveland now, all Cleveland just call me Cleveland, and he knows he's gonna sell out. So that's the way I operate. But you have to make sure you think, rather than to just jump on stage and say, everybody say, oh.
When are you coming to Indianapolis, to the Palladium?
Well, you know what? We owe Indianapolis a call because actually my mother got diagnosed with cancer. I was going to be at the, what's that place?
The Jazz Kitchen?
Jazz Kitchen. And, and it just, I don't think he understood. I mean, some people think, and a lot of artists do this when their mother and father get sick. Well, she or he died while I was on the road, and I can respect that. I can respect that because you got to make a living for your family and stuff like that. But I have no children. I didn't have a wife at the time. I was all my parents had financially if things were going to go really bad. So I had to cancel that show, and I canceled it. And I don't think he was too happy with it because whatever. But my mother had cancer, my father was ill, and I had to do what I had to do. Right. So that was the first thing to let me know that there's some people who really don't who feel life should go on even when people are sick, and that's what I said in that. So that said, I'd like to come back to Indianapolis and probably play that club first because that was the club I canceled on when my mother and father got sick. But I haven't made the call. We haven't because I had COVID. I got my first bad round of COVID in the last month. Brother. Now I've been sick before, not that often.
Really?
But that COVID came and it hit me this time, and it was just like, don't breathe. I was like, it's like that Richard Pryor skit. Don't breathe.
Really? I knock on wood. I didn't never get COVID, knock on wood. But I've seen the devastation that it caused with a lot of people that I knew, and it wasn't pretty.
No. So well, that's it. That's what I'm going to do with Indianapolis because I'm just getting over this now. But the thing is, what's beautiful about this is I don't have to make decisions based on desperation or anything like that. I can make decisions based on what's my schedule like.
Right.
You know, what am I going to do? You know, this way. I mean, I'm very blessed and very humbled to be in a position where I'll always have content that I can either make loans against or sell to make ends meet. And that's something I'm very proud of, and because I've just seen so many brothers and sisters end up with nothing in this industry, and it breaks my heart. I'm not rich by any stretch of the imagination, but I have content, and I have content that's valuable. And as long as you can do that, you'll be okay in this industry. And that's what I try to tell the younger musicians. They don't listen, but I say it anyway.
Walter, how can the viewers reach out to you, and what's your website?
My website is walterbeasley.com, but I actually just started this new thing with it's very intimate. It's called grouped, grouped.com/Walter Beasley, where I just, talk to we talked about that before, where I'm starting this little intimate thing. And if you really want to get at me and listen and talk about things that, that are important to me and musicians, especially, I do little lessons in there as well. That's what I do. Also on Facebook, not the personal page, but the professional page, musicians page, I'm on there. Twitter. I'm on all digital formats, musical formats, Spotify, Pandora, all that type of stuff. So, and I'm doing, I do well there too. So I'm very, very, very appreciative of everybody who's ever supported me in my career. And I know sometimes I can be a little edgy, but it's important to me to tell the truth, my truth, and try to help as many people as I can. I tell you, you said one thing, I'm gonna let you go after this, or I'm gonna let myself go after this. There are about 3 or 4 younger musicians who I'm kind of mentoring.
Yeah.
And I've seen their numbers just skyrocket. They're no longer a slave to a system that really doesn't want them, and I've seen their numbers start to really, really
Who are
improve.
they, Walter? Who are they? So the viewers can follow you.
Here's the thing, man. If I say that, the environment is very, very toxic.
I got you.
So there may be people who don't like the fact that they're testing the system.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, but they're starting to band together, do concerts together. They saw me, Gerald, Everett Harp, and George Howard do a set of concerts all by ourselves and sell out arenas at 5,000 clip. Right. Now they're starting to come back and do the same thing with them.
I got you.
You know what I mean? So that's I think that's my favorite thing to look at this time, as far as, I help do that. I help make people more confident. I help me promote people more independent of the system. So you'll be seeing that a lot. When you see 2, 3, 4 black saxophonists and one, go up and do a concert, you'll know that, you'll be able to tell. But I just don't want to say who they are,
Walter, I greatly appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to share your story, your journey with the viewers here. My heart goes out to you. I'm always going to be a major, major supporter of you. Hope to see you when you come to Indianapolis, Indiana. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton Show.
There you go.